Ethiopia, it is called Abay. Every country name it differently. This transboundary river is commonly known as Nile. It has been and is still the source of the livelihood for millions of Africans, mainly in the north and eastern part of Africa. It is also the basis for economic growth and advancement. Unlike the time in the past, the utilization and implementation of electrical projects and dams, mainly the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, it is creating fierce disputes among the riparian countries, especially Egypt, Ethiopia, and Sudan. Most riparian countries actually agree the fair utilization and distribution of this resource. What does history tell us about Nile and its utilization? How do we evaluate the current situation pertaining to Nile? Where are we heading? And what is expected from the government and the people of the riparian countries of Nile, especially Ethiopia? These consecutive programs do have adequate answers to these and similar questions. This is Shimelis Bonsa Gulema at the newly launched media, the Eastern Media. Please stay with our program for the latest information on this market. Interesting. I would like to discuss on this topic in more detail again. You raised the national consensus and the unanimity with the Egyptians, but for me, you may correct me, it's also a matter of priority as opposed to Ethiopians. Abay might not be the priority, as you have mentioned, for or Nile was not a priority in the same level with that of Egypt. That's one thing I would like you to discuss on. The second one, you were saying that they were disabling. How was it mainly done, or how was it possible for Egyptians that Ethiopia missed to sense?
Okay, so the first is priority you mentioned. It's a very important point, priority, because until recently, the dam project has a long history in Ethiopia, but it is marginal, peripheral in many ways to the overall development project in the country. But then there is also this assumption, this misconception, let me say, a misconception about Ethiopia, and that is Ethiopia has so many rivers, so many resources, water resources, and there is no need to have this dependency on the one single river, which is the Abay River. So Ethiopia can use many other rivers, in different regions of the country, whether it could build a dam, it could use them for irrigation purposes, and many other projects. But that assumption is not true. It's not correct. If you see Ethiopia's water resources, water availability in the country, 70% of Ethiopia's waters come from less than 20% of the country. We're talking about 70%. 70% of Ethiopia's entire total water resources come from less than 20% of the total land mass of the country, which means from the western highland areas of Ethiopia. So the rest of the country, meaning more than 80% of the country, produces only less than 30% of the entire total water resource of the country. What that means is there is a very significant, dangerous scarcity of water in Ethiopia. And more than 40% of Ethiopians live in conditions of water stress, water scarcity. A very significant number, and this will definitely increase because of climate change, global warming, environmental degradation, and population increase, and increasing urbanization. So in that case, I think we need to begin to correct the misconceptions about Ethiopia being the water tower of Africa. It is a water tower of Africa, but the water it has will not be enough for this exploding population. We have about more than 110 million people today, and this is expected to double by 2015. 2015. So we're gonna have like 200 million, more than 200 million people in about 30 years. And we don't have the available resources to support that kind of population. So there is a priority deficit, a priority problem within the Ethiopian leadership, within the Ethiopian decision-making circles. But Egypt doesn't have that kind of luxury. It doesn't have that kind of luxury, especially when it comes to water. But Ethiopia is also going in that direction. Water is not going to be a luxury for Ethiopia as well, for the reasons I mentioned.
Exactly.
Because water is not enough in the country. Existing water is very limited. And secondly, it will be extremely scarce in the coming few years because of population increase, urbanization, environmental change. So we need to reprioritize our policies. Our policies. So that's one thing. The second question is about.
You mentioned about the disabling.
How the Egyptians.
But my question was, how was it mainly done by the Egyptians that Ethiopia missed or Ethiopia hasn't sensed in the past?
The Egyptians have been able to mobilize their diplomatic muscle and diplomatic support, partly because of Egypt's strategic significance. Egypt is one of the two countries, Arab countries, that have signed a peace treaty with Israel, and that has given it a very important position in global diplomacy. Secondly, Egypt is also the link between the Mediterranean, the Red Sea, the Indian Ocean. The Suez Canal is a critical strategic asset, meaning major shipping route, especially for oil from the Persian Gulf to Europe and to the Americas, go through the Suez Canal. So it has a very strategic importance globally. So you would expect that the international community would be more interested in defending Egyptian interests rather than Ethiopia's, and sometimes at the expense of Ethiopia's. And so that's one thing. So there is a kind of imbalance in the importance of these two countries on the global scene. Secondly, the Egyptians have also succeeded in mobilizing Arab support. The Arab League, for instance, have recently unanimously, I think, and almost I think I don't know if there is any single country exception, but usually unanimously supported Egyptian interest when it comes to the Nile River. And so the question of Egypt, the question of the Abay, the Nile River, has become a matter of interest not just to Egypt, but also to the Arab world. So the Arab countries see the Nile River as their own issue. It's not just an Egyptian issue. Ethiopia have not done that. So when Ethiopia tried to secure funding, loans for development projects, and this was done during the imperial period, during the period of Emperor Haile Selassie, or the Derg period, or after that during the leadership of the Prime Minister. Unless when they approach international institutions like the World Bank or IMF or other multilateral, bilateral financial lending institutions, countries, the Egyptians will follow with pressure. With pressure, meaning with the support of the Arab countries, especially countries like Saudi Arabia or the Persian Gulf countries that produce oil, a very strategic resource. And Ethiopia doesn't have that kind of clout internationally. So the Egyptians have that advantage. But there is a failure on the part of the Ethiopian leadership, and that is it hasn't mobilized the issue, the Abay issue, nationally, as a national issue first, creating a kind of a national consensus as a kind of a matter of life and death for Ethiopia also, not just for Egypt. And secondly, the support of fellow countries, especially fellow countries in sub-Saharan Africa. Meaning the vast majority of the riparian countries are sub-Saharan African countries. There are 11 countries in the Nile Basin region, and 2 of them are entirely dependent on the Nile River, without producing any in the Sudan and Egypt. The rest of the riparian countries are not represented fairly in any of the negotiations. So Ethiopia should have mobilized the support of the sub-Saharan African countries, but also globalize the issue as one of justice, as one of just cause, as one of fairness, to gain support in any of the deals, in any of the negotiations over the Nile River. So there is a failure on the part of our own leadership, but there is also the internal strengths of Egypt and the big diplomatic clout that Egypt enjoys globally because of its location.